geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Mr. Joseph Nunn.
I have very little news, but I do have one item that we can get into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I know what that item is.
Do you?
I think so.
Okay. Well, it actually pertains to you.
Mm-hmm.
So we will speak. So are we in?
We're in. So this is our Thanksgiving special.
Oh, this has been a whole year in the making.
It's Turkey Day coming up in just a few days.
Turkey Day.
If you're diligently listening to us upon release, we're getting you into the Thanksgiving spirit. And if not, thank you for coming after the fact. So you're getting the leftovers.
Maybe you're not a big Thanksgiving fan, but you're a Monster fan. So.
Yes.
Either or.
Everyone knows Thanksgiving leftovers are actually the best. So
They are.
Yeah, you know what? This is the conversation. We're actually hosting Thanksgiving, and there are only like 9 of us. But my wife still wants a 16-pound turkey, and I'm like, why? Because of the leftovers.
Right.
And I'm like,
because of the leftovers. You don't know how comforting that is to know that you don't have to cook that night for supper. There's something waiting for you.
Listen, I'm all about a turkey sandwich. I have no problems with it. I actually wanted to get 2 smaller turkeys so we could double down on the legs and the wings. How come no one is like genetically modified turkeys to have multiple legs and wings at this, right? Come on.
That sounds like the plot of a horror movie.
I think
don't condone that.
Yeah. That just sort of.
I say make it happen.
I think there's like sort of a visceral turnoff when you're looking at something that's
I don't need to see
it.
A multi-legged carcass. Who wants the third wing?
I mean, then you're like, is this the thing? Like, has it started mutating into its next form?
Yeah, it peels open.
And then you see then that's like easy access to that meat on the rib cage. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
Sure. If like stalks don't come out and grab you.
Yes.
If you survive the initial carving,
avoid
you're good
the
to go.
Stalks and the mutated beaks that come out.
And hope like hell it doesn't lay something in your gullet.
Hey, thankfully this year I'm taking advantage of this. I am not going anywhere on Thanksgiving, and we are just the 3 of us gonna sit down, watch monster movies, and have our dinner.
That's what we do every year. That's what we do every year.
I am deeply jealous.
Yeah, that's we just make it. It's actually a board game day. Yeah.
See, we'll get into it on the back end with our confessional. Anyways, so let's get into some news.
Yes.
Well, we can talk. So we want to mention what our 2 features are before.
Well, our 2 features, not only do we need to introduce them, but really we have to introduce the reasoning why, as I do every year.
Yes.
Because even though Christina is based in Chicago, now she is a New Yorker at heart. So Jeff and I are in New York still, but we spent our childhoods in New York. And Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving were huge in, I think, shaping the cinema goers that we became, because they were the days that they played monster movies on WOR-TV. Thanksgiving was always the realm of King Kong and his ilk. And Friday was set aside for Godzilla movies. So this was not only you were looking forward to the turkey, that was probably an afterthought for kids. You were looking forward to sitting down and watching these movies all day for 2 days and having off from school, having your action figures out, the whole 9 yards. So this was a kid's holiday that rivaled Christmas. Almost. Not quite. Almost. So we've been revisiting this for the past 3 years, and is this our third?
This is our third
18, 19, 20, yeah. Third
Double
annual
creature feature.
So yeah, this is our third annual tribute to those Days of Yore and WOR, all of you who are listening that are in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Did WOR go? I'm sure it did.
It's
I'm
a
sure
tri-state,
it did.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think the broadcast stops as soon as you get to the...
So there you have it. We are doing Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla today, the original 1974, because they used to play that every year. And we're doing Mighty Joe Young, which was always, they did play King Kong, Son of Kong, but they usually started their broadcast day on Thursday with Mighty Joe Young. And we are covering...
Just to whet your appetite.
Just to whet your appetite for bigger things. And as we're going to discuss, there are a lot of familial ties between Mighty Joe Young and King Kong.
King Kong. So you might as well just call this King Kong Jr.
It's probably a more successful King Kong Jr. than Son of Kong, actually. I'll take this over Son of Kong. But
I'd like to see those box office receipts because apparently Mighty Joe Young didn't do that well.
No, it didn't. So that's what we're doing today.
Very cool. Very excited. I'm looking forward to it. So before that, we will get into the news. I have one news item, and we're going to rely on Christina here to give us some perspective because we've mentioned this name numerous times, Alan Dean Foster.
Yeah.
Who, again, if you're Star Wars nerds like us, Alien, he wrote Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was, if Star Wars failed, was going to be the backup sequel. I think he ghost wrote Star Wars, but his name has been attached to some pretty big
and if you were a kid back then and you couldn't get into an R-rated movie, you went for that tie-in novel because that's the best you could get outside of Famous Monsters magazine.
And if you were lucky, they had the little photo. They had the 5 or 6 pages of photos in the middle.
Color, sometimes
sometimes, not always.
And Alan Dean Foster, probably 90% of the time, was the name on these books, on these movie tie-ins.
So anyways, he is making claim that the evil empire known as Disney has stopped paying him royalties for his books because when they took over Lucasfilm in 2012, apparently that just dried up. And that's
okay. So what's happening here is Disney is claiming that when they purchased the catalog, that they purchased the right to publish and distribute, but they did not take on the obligation to pay him royalties, which is just flat out a violation of
and apparently they didn't give him heads up that this was going on. So
this cannot fly. Okay. Right. When you sign a contract as an author, the person who is publishing your books is agreeing to pay you royalties for sales of the books if you earn out over your advance. Now, just because the publisher has changed, if that new publisher continues to publish the books, they take on the obligation of paying the royalties. And the Science Fiction Writers of America have gotten involved in this case.
And that's big that they're involved in this.
Yeah, because this has implications and ramifications across the board for writers everywhere.
Yeah, correct.
And because then any multimedia company could come in and buy out a back catalog and say, well, we've purchased the right to publish, but we haven't purchased the obligation to pay. And then writers just get screwed. And this is not, people think of writers and they think people writing novels, okay? Right. Writers write your TV shows. Writers write your movies. Writers write your video games.
Commercials.
Writers write your commercials, okay?
Every movie that we talk about on this show
as a writer
was birthed by a writer.
Yeah.
Okay, writers provide all that content you see on the internet. All right. Yeah. Writers are inextricably linked to everything you like to do in your life. And
you're carrying this much further than I even expected. This is good. Keep going.
So, but it's incredibly damaging that a massive company like this would claim that they can take someone's work and publish it and not pay them royalties for it. You have to honor that contract. Yeah. So this is a very, very high profile case. I expect to hear a lot more from this as it goes forward. Obviously SFWA getting involved. Yeah. That's a huge organization with tons of writers. And look, Disney's putting themselves in a bad position. Okay. Yeah. because if you become known as a person who, as the kind of company that won't pay out your obligations. Now, I should make this clear. Generally, there's a bunch of different divisions
Right.
in these big multimedia companies. So this is not like,
Some,
this
Tiger
isn't
sitting on high.
like
saying-
Iger sitting on
Right.
high saying, I won't give money to Alan Dean Foster.
Or Mickey Mouse himself. No, we won't pay you.
I will not cut that check.
This is not a decision that's made at that level. This is a decision that was made by somebody like in management or some
Yeah,
lawyer.
because they're saving X amount of dollars, even though.
Right.
Can I just take 1 second? Because he wrote this very scathing letter. We won't get into the details of it all, but this one little blot. Now, first of all, the man's 74 years old, and he is battling cancer.
Yes.
And his wife has conditions as well. So, these guys write these books, and he probably got a nice chunk of change years ago or whatever. And we'll talk about this as far as like what are we really talking about as far as, royalties? Are we talking pennies on the dollar? Are we talking more substantial?
So normally in a contract, you get a percentage of a sale. Now, like on a standard contract, basically people don't realize this, authors don't make money. So if you look at like a trade
artists for that matter.
a trade paperback that's like costs $15, the average author, I'm not talking about authors who are really successful who can negotiate higher rates, but the average author is going to make probably $1.50 to $2 on that book, on the sale of that book. And obviously, like over time, as you earn out your advances, you depend on your royalties,
right,
to sustain you.
Yeah.
And he's written some very, very, very popular books. I actually met Alan Dean Foster at Phoenix Comic-Con.
Oh, very cool.
3 years ago, we sat next to each other at the signing table, and he's a very, very kind man. And it's absurd. It's absurd that this is happening to him.
Well, again, Disney also acquired 20th Century Fox. So it's not just his Star Wars stuff that we're dealing with. We're talking about his Alien adaptation as well.
Right.
But I want to just read this little blurb. So this is part of his letter, and he wrote, when one company buys another, they acquired its liabilities as well as its assets. You are certainly reaping the benefits of the assets. I'd very much like my minuscule, though it's not small to me, share.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like the money that he makes is meaningless in the overall income of Disney, but it means a lot to the writer who makes it, just like he says, and like the thing is that writers in general and writing advocacy organizations can't let this stand because it sets a precedent, like I said, where media companies can come in and acquire assets and then just be like, but I don't have to pay you because Disney didn't pay Alan Dean Foster. And
they set a precedent.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Disney's upset that he's gone public with this.
They
were looking to sign like an NDA about this negotiation where he's like, there should be no negotiation. This is the contract that you picked up.
This is ridiculous. This sounds like it can't be real that somebody as big as Disney could even consider getting away with this. It's like akin to not paying Bob Dylan songwriter royalties.
He's next, by the way. Don't worry.
Well, look, record companies are always looking for a way not to pay.
Let's not give them any ideas. Let's not give them any ideas.
Yeah, so then you start weeding down, you start taking away from this guy, and after a while, it does add up.
So that's a perfect example of how like rights could be taken away from another writer in the future. So say Bob Dylan's back catalog gets sold to another company,
by somebody else.
Okay, and we know that happens all the time.
Yeah,
just happened to Taylor Swift, right?
Taylor Swift, it just happened to her, where she's going back and she's re-recording those songs because she has no control over them anymore. And so then somebody could say, oh well, I've acquired your back catalog, but I don't have to pay you royalties on. That's exactly what happened with Taylor Swift.
Right. So
crazy.
Look,
whoever thought that Taylor Swift would come up on this show and we'd be defending her.
This is such a dangerous precedent, and it's got to be stopped in its tracks. And if people care about the quality of the stuff that they read and see, then they need to speak out against this, because this is what's going to happen. Reputable writers who, by the way, Disney wants reputable writers to work on their projects are not going to want to go to Disney because they're not going to want to put themselves in a position
Sure.
where they
Yep.
could be potentially screwed out of future income.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is really, really, really important case, and people should definitely be angry about this, and
Yeah. Well, we're going to
letting
stay on
Disney
top of
know
it,
that
and
this
I
isn't
hope that we
acceptable.
can, we're like you said, some people, most people walk into a bookstore and you're like, oh, that guy, look at this. That's his third book. He must be making money hand over fist. That's great. Good for him. No.
No.
So,
And meanwhile, he's outside the bookstore with cap in hand.
no, he's working in the bookstore at the cappuccino counter.
It's true.
So we
yeah.
will stay on top of this because I find this fascinating, and yeah, we need to see it through to the end. So that's unfortunately the only news item I have, unless you kids have anything to.
Well, I do follow up on my news item from last week.
Oh, geez, yes, it was almost a given after.
So
Yep.
last week I said, oh, there's this rumor that Wonder Woman 84 might end up on
Yep.
HBO Max, and we were
Yeah.
all mad about that. And guess what? Wonder Woman
True
84 is going to end up on HBO Max. Now they're saying that they're going to release it in theaters simultaneously on Christmas Day, but guess what? Theaters aren't going to be open. I think this is so incredibly short-sighted. Now they're saying they want to do this to drive people to HBO Max, which has not picked up that many subscribers as a platform. But here's the thing. HBO Max costs $15 a month, and they have nothing like the back catalog of, like, say, that's on Disney Plus, right? Where, like, you have all the Disney stuff and you have the Fox stuff, you have Star Wars movies, you have Marvel movies, and Disney Plus costs half the amount of HBO Max.
True.
And HBO Max thinks that people are going to go sign up for their service so they can watch Wonder Woman and then stay. They're not going to. They're going to sign up for the service. They're going to get the free trial. They're going to watch Wonder Woman. They're going to get out. Yeah. So they're not going to drive subscribers to the platform. And they're leaving so much money on the table. If they had rented this for $20 across every streaming platform, they would make so much money. Yeah. Because people are desperate to watch new movies, and they want to be able to watch it. If they have an Apple TV, they want to be able to watch it on iTunes. If they have a Roku, they want to be able to watch it on Amazon, or people with their phones, they want to just be able to rent it on YouTube and watch it there. They don't want to have to go and sign up for yet another service to watch this movie.
Nope.
Yeah, people I think would pay even more than $20. You could go up to $30 with Wonder Woman.
Easy there, big guy.
Yeah.
Well, we paid $29.99, for Mulan.
For Mulan, and this is like a few tiers above Mulan.
I agree.
I think in terms of anticipation.
Although I still have some reservations about this one.
But plus, like, think about how you're blocking off even, I don't even want to say advertising, awareness that the film has been released.
Well, half of those products have already been put on the market because it was supposed to be released months ago. We talked about the fact that the Doritos, the Wonder Woman branded Doritos, have been out there. People are like, oh, that came out? No.
What I mean, though, is, like, if you are a person who, like, regularly goes into iTunes, and I do because I have an Apple TV, right? So I go into iTunes to watch something, and they show you, like, all the new movies that are out. You would see, like, a big ad, like Wonder Woman now available, right? But
they're not going to promote it on iTunes.
Right, but you don't see that if it's on HBO Max. Like, you've put it behind this walled garden.
Yeah, the only way you would see that is if you already have HBO Max.
Right.
And that's not going to help them get any new subscribers.
Right. Or, like, you're the kind of person like us who's following entertainment news or whatever.
Right. Correct.
I just think that they're basically setting money on fire, like, by doing this. They're giving up so much potential income for a film. Look, the first one made $800 million worldwide. Why would you do this for a few million subscribers to HBO Max? Like, you're not going to get it. You're not.
Talking about setting precedents, it seems like they're moving the DC canon.
Yes, correct.
Completely to HBO Max. Are they dissolve that DC? Because there was that DC Demand. I don't know what it's called, but that Titan show is on there. Swamp Thing before it got canceled. Is
But I
that
think
going to
that's
go
coming
away?
back. I think that is coming back. I'm looking right here. HBO Max subscribers are looking around 38 million, where Netflix has almost 200 million.
Right. Well, again, like think about like they're charging $15 a month for HBO Max. Netflix costs comparable, right? But Netflix's catalog is huger.
Correct.
They've had years to build their brand. They've made themselves indispensable. Like almost everybody who has more than one streaming service has Netflix plus something else, right?
Yeah.
So Netflix has really like moved into this sphere and established themselves as a brand. I bet you half of those HBO Max subscribers are people who have HBO on their cable already. And
that is because you do get HBO Max for free when you they deleted HBO Go, which I used to get for free with my subscription, and now it's this Max. I mean, they got the Warner Brothers catalog, obviously the DC. They do have Studio Ghibli, and they keep adding stuff to that. But yeah, this is. I mean, I hate to say it. This is the start of these streaming wars.
But you know what's going to happen? Like, I'm not going to pay for HBO Max.
No, it's going to be pirated.
No, I'm either going to wait for the movie to come out, because eventually it'll come out on DVD or whatever, or I'm going to sign up for the 7-day free trial. And I'm going to watch Wonder Woman and the Witches, and then I'm going to cancel my subscription because I'm not paying $15 a month. There's nothing that HBO has besides Wonder Woman, that
you're not in for the Zack Snyder cut?
No.
Do we feel obligated to review that?
Well, now I hear it's going to be a multi-part odyssey.
Oh yeah, no, it's
no longer going to be a single film.
No, it's going to be like
a mini series.
I don't know how we could review it because I'm not getting an HBO Max subscription. And
and as of now, I don't either because
that's right. There's Roku still got an issue. So
because
there you go.
Like Jeff was just saying that I also because I have my cell phones through AT&T, there was a deal, and I have DirecTV with cable. There's a deal that I got where I get free HBO. So I am entitled to free HBO Max, but I refuse to watch it as an app. I'm waiting. Like I want it on Roku. I want it to watch it in the comfort of my living room and not have to worry
but can
about
you put it on your phone and just? But can't you just watch it on your phone and sling it to your television?
I'm much too lazy to do that. I am waiting for Roku to pick it up.
But again, this is like Roku has become like the real leader in like people who just want to stream and they don't have cable, right? So like HBO Max blocking themselves out of Roku for whatever reason why they can't make a deal there. Think about how many potential subscribers, again, they're leaving money on the table. I mean, I just can't believe that they're saying like, oh, but if you don't have HBO Max, you can go see it in the theaters. Look, by Christmas, we're already up to 1,800 deaths a day.
That's
I think the theaters
with
are
a big
safer
asterisk. If your state still has theaters open, you can still go see it.
Right.
And we would still have to jump the border illegally.
Again, and like Christina was saying, if the theater's going to be open, even in Danbury on Christmas.
And I don't think they're going to be at that point. I think case numbers and deaths are going to be too high. I mean, we've already pulled back the tier 3 mitigations here in Chicago. The Music Box is closed again.
Is it?
Yeah. Yep. Even though there haven't been any cases associated with theater going.
I still love the argument where people are like, oh, no, you'll never catch me in a theater. And I'm like, I go to a grocery store and I'm jam-packed shoulder to shoulder with people. That's okay. But I go to a theater that houses 300 plus people and there was 12 in there. That's somehow a issue.
But the fact of the matter is that as case numbers rise, any theaters that are open are going to close. So this is not going to play in theaters. The only option that's going to be available is HBO Max. And I just think it's amazingly short-sighted of them to do this. I don't think it's going to turn out the way they think it is, like where people are going to continue to pay $15 a month. So
it's a lot, regardless of what it breaks down to.
Right.
Like, with very little new content outside of these two that we're talking about.
They're just not going to. I just think it's nuts. I think it's not going to fly.
Well, now that these two news articles have got us all fired up and mad,
I know.
Let's get into this fun movie. Let's take the taste out of our mouth here.
I'm on my soapbox today.
Listen, I knew what I was getting into when I brought up the Alan Dean Foster, but I completely forgot about the Wonder Woman. Not good news, but whatever. So Jim, what are we talking about first?
We are talking about Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Now, this is how the film is known and titled today. So it is available currently on a Criterion box set of all the Showa Godzilla films. Now, when I say Showa, that means the original series, which had, I believe, 15 Godzilla films in it.
There's a lot out there.
From the original King of the Monsters, early 50s, through to Terror of Mechagodzilla, which was the last film of its era. And so this is the second to last, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Now, back in the day, I talked about Channel 9 WOR showing these movies on the day after Thanksgiving. This always began the broadcast day. There were always 3 movies they showed. One year they actually showed 4, but usually it was 3. And this was always the first to be followed by Godzilla versus Megalon, and then capped off by Godzilla versus the Smog Monster.
Which we have covered in previous
and talked about quite exhaustively. But and I always was interested to know who programmed this running order on WOR. Was there thought involved? Did somebody actually that thought about this, was familiar? Because it's almost perfect. These 3, I wouldn't change that running order, because Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, as much as I love, the big G, this was easily the least of the 3 for me that they used to show. So this whet your appetite about 12 noon, whenever they started this thing. Megalon kicked it up a notch because you had the Jet Jaguar and you had his fun song at the end. And then to me, the ultimate Godzilla movie was always Smog Monster, just because it was so weird and borderline. I was gonna say, because you're weird. Yeah. And by that time, the sun had gone down. So if you didn't turn your lights on, you're in this weird kind of twilight world anyway.
Oh, you're really painting a picture today, huh?
Because you're in the middle of autumn. So you've got that really pinkish sky that you always used to see in the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special when they're pumpkin pie.
But you can't see anymore.
So the day was over. You're pretty much exhausted. You've got your leftovers already because now you're into dinner time.
And
you just are coming down with this bizarre Smog Monster. But today's discussion is not about that. It is about Mechagodzilla, which is the first. Now, interestingly enough, this came into fruition originally in 1974. This is when it was released in Japan, and its Japanese title is Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. There's no controversy around that title. It is pretty straightforward, and that's what the movie is about. When it was released in the U.S. 3 years later, in 1977, the Godzilla series had ended in Japan. It was done. Terror of Mechagodzilla closed the book on this particular chapter of Godzilla movies, and there wasn't any more in Japan until Return of Godzilla, or as we know it, Godzilla 1985. This was re-released in America in 1977. Kids in America had no idea that the series was done. This was a new Godzilla movie, and they called it Godzilla versus the Bionic Monster.
Gee, I wonder where they came up with that.
And I remember the magazine cover, Famous Monsters. This is one of the most vivid memories I have as a kid. Going into 7-Eleven, seeing the cover of Famous Monsters with Godzilla against Mechagodzilla there, grabbing it, my dad was with me, and bringing it up to the counter, and the girl who was probably a teenager who was behind the counter turned her back for a second, whipped around, and she had put in vampire teeth to scare me because I was buying a Famous Monsters magazine, and she hissed.
She was just waiting for that moment for some kid to walk into the store.
And she was just, she was so happy that she could scare some kid. And she did scare me. I jumped back. I was probably, in 1977, I was 6 years old when this movie came out. So, and I have never forgotten that for the rest of my life. That girl.
Did she just laugh maniacally?
He laughed. Yes, my father was laughing. It was all a big joke to everybody except for me.
Yeah, and your therapist.
Yes. So yeah, they called it Godzilla versus Bionic Monster. Obviously, that did not sit well with those that were the Universal who had come up with the. Actually, they didn't come up with the term bionic. I don't.
No, but
that was in the
Bionic Man was pretty damn big in '77.
But they took umbrage to that and they threatened legal action. So Cinema Shares, which was the small distribution company that was releasing this movie in America, changed tactic immediately. So it was already out in theaters and they released a new poster and new prints that changed it to Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster.
They still didn't get it right.
So for some reason, they still didn't call it Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
Did they not think kids knew what mecha meant?
No, I don't know what they were thinking there. But for years, the print that you saw on TV, and this is what they showed on WOR, those Black Fridays, was Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster, which we all know to be Mechagodzilla. So it's just a very bizarre history. And then, of course, that distributor lost the rights to it over the years. Then it started showing up on TV as Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla because there was an international cut that was dubbed in English that they were showing overseas in English-speaking countries. That became the main copy. So Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster has drifted away into the history of time over the years. And now we have an English version called Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
Woof.
Deep breath.
You are a font of information.
Did you watch the English version for this?
Yes,
no,
because
I watched subtitled.
Here's another facet of this history of this film. Once it went away from TV, because during the video boom, a lot of these local stations like WOR and WNEW in New York that would show Saturday afternoon movies suddenly stopped showing them because you could see these at any time that you wanted because of your VCR. They didn't get the ratings that they used to. So you'd instead see sporting events and stuff that you could only see on TV. So unfortunately, the Thanksgiving and Black Friday showings of these monster movies went away, I think, in 1985. That was the last year that they did them. And so for many years, they went out of circulation because they weren't being shown on TV. And maybe, you know, these little mom and pop video companies, like you see this with Night of the Living Dead because that was in public domain. That is kind of questionable in itself. And we know that Toho is very litigious, but still, because they renamed the films, it was kind of up in the air who owned them.
Owned it.
Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster is not really a Toho movie. So let's put it out on VHS until they tell us to take it off the shelves. And so that's what happened. Year after year, there'd be these different companies that would put out these videos and they would disappear. Then another company would do it and then it would disappear. Then another company would do it, so on and so on. Until finally, I think Columbia in the late 90s, because of the travesty that was the Matthew Broderick starring Godzilla, they got the rights to some of these films. And they finally came out on DVD in early 2000s, I believe. And that's what I watched for this viewing was my 2004 copy.
Okay, I don't know what year. Well, yeah, 2004, because it's the 50th anniversary DVD.
Yes.
That's exactly what I watched. And I watched it subtitled. But it was weird because the TriStar logo comes up at the beginning before the Toho logo.
Right, because they had the rights to it at the time.
I guess so, yeah. And it was kind of weird seeing that, but that is the one I watched.
Now, Christina, do you have the Criterion box set yet?
I do not have the Criterion box set yet.
But you have the channel.
I do have the channel, and they have several Gojira movies on the channel. So, but I have the same. I have the same edition that Jeff was just talking about, the 50th anniversary edition of this, and it's the. I have like this weird sort of mishmash of the films that I've collected over the years from various editions because I refuse to watch them in English. And so before the Criterion editions came out, I would be desperately trying to find discs that actually had the Japanese on it because it makes me completely bonkers to watch people's mouths not in sync with the words that they're saying.
That's not what he said, especially
but you see, to me, yes, I agree with you. But in terms of these movies, that soundtrack, those voices of these actors that dubbed things are so wrapped up in my memory of watching these movies back then. I actually prefer it. And this is the only case where I would prefer watching a dubbed version of a movie are these Godzilla movies because of my memory of this is how it should be because this is how I saw it as a kid.
See, when I was a kid, I just couldn't, even when I was a kid, I was like, that's not right. Like his mouth is not moving like with what he's saying. And now that I know not a lot of Japanese, a very small amount of Japanese.
More than the two of us.
Very small amount. But even just there's something really nice that comes with learning even a little bit of a language, because you start to pick out some of the subtleties that aren't translated, which is kind of nice. And like, I'm like, no, he didn't say that. Like, that
Right.
he actually said this. So I can't watch it in English. I cannot do it. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, and there's not much to argue, I think, against that with this particular movie.
No,
because
except
the
you read
characters are
King
pretty,
Caesar
they're
as Caesar, but they call him Shiza.
but
That's because of the sounds of Japanese.
Right.
The
But you read it phonetically as
it's
you know,
Caesar, but yeah, they say
Caesar.
Caesar in the
they're
the
saying
dub.
Shiza, because there's not if you look at the Japanese alphabet, I don't want to give you guys like a Japanese lesson.
2 hours later.
But if you look at the Japanese alphabet, the reason why why they say gojira and not Godzilla is because those sounds literally don't exist in the Japanese language. So when they're saying Shiza, they're saying that because they don't have like that combination of sounds and letters that we see as Caesar. So that's really
How are we ever going to communicate with aliens? We can't even communicate with each other from one country to the other. Seriously.
So getting into the movie itself.
Yes. Let's go.
Starts
We've
off
primed
because this is, there's a marked difference between a 1960s Godzilla movie, and I'm not even going to talk about the 50s because those were very unique to themselves. There's only a couple. There's a big difference between the 60s style of Godzilla film and the 70s style of Godzilla film. The 70s style was really tailored towards kids. Started off with that way in the late 60s with Godzilla's Revenge, which is kind of like a kid's fantasy.
Oh, that's that's an unique animal in and of itself.
And it's interesting because Jun Fukuda is the director of this, and he directed Son of Godzilla, which is when I really think of where that shift to like that more lighthearted, not serious, like geared towards.
But there was a couple of that were stuck in there, like Destroy All Monsters came out after Son of Godzilla, which was more, and then Smog Monster came out after Godzilla's Revenge, so almost kind of going against the grain of what had come before. But then after that, in the 70s, it just kind of steamrolled like into that lighthearted fare that we were seeing.
And I just want to mention really quickly, because there's a tie back to one of my favorite movies. The music is by Masaru Sato, who is the composer for Yojimbo, and
that's huge.
Numerous other Kurosawa films.
That's what I was going to mention right off the get-go, like the huge drums that come through with the opening titles. But you've got just that boom, 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 and it's just so bass heavy that it's great to be pounding out of your speakers if you've got this blaring. And believe me, I did last night when I was doing this. But having said that, this is probably one of the my least favorite of the later Godzilla films, just because of the pacing. There's a lot, especially for a kid, there's a lot of human backstory here. And the monsters, they have up front the battle with Anguirus. That creature's name is spelled so many different ways. Then you've got the imposter Godzilla, and then there's the battle between
and you knew
big
it's
reveal.
Not him. You know it's not him right from the beginning. The sound effects
because
alone.
They telegraph it because his little
he's got the little
see the skin come off
shiny.
and the silver underneath him. So you've got that fight scene where the aliens think that Godzilla is killed, and that happens in the first 10-15 minutes. And then there's this whole big stretch where no monster action happens whatsoever. It's the aliens trying to get the statue of King Caesar, and the humans trying to figure out what the statue means and what the prophecy means. So there's a lot of that, and you're just kind of tapping your foot, waiting for Godzilla to show up again. And they give you a little
Godzilla
piece.
Doesn't show up until like 20 minutes in.
You do see him get hit by lightning and kind of recharge his batteries midway through the movie. So because he is wounded by Mechagodzilla in the beginning, he goes off to lick his wounds. He gets charged up and he comes back again just as the humans are waking up King Caesar. So there's a lot of this exposition and story that as a kid, I really wasn't interested in. I just wanted the monsters. So you're waiting through this to get to the final battle. And it's funny because so often in these Godzilla movies, especially the later ones, it's space aliens that are the bad guys.
Once again, they look like Planet of the Apes aliens.
A complete ripoff. And I think that was intentional.
Intentional.
Because that was like the height of Planet of the Apes fervor back then in 1974. I think the show, the series was already coming out. And of course, you had the whole film series already out at that point as well. Having said that you're waiting for the monster action, I have to say that as a kid, the most memorable scene is during that reveal when one of the aliens gets shot on the cruise ship. And you first see that dissolve over his face. And of course you hear those weird sound effects. And then the alien reveals itself as a gorilla. And he's like a grunting gorilla, after he's revealed. And then he jumps off the ship with the fake statue. It is memorable that the aliens are like refugees from Planet of the Apes here. And it's the only time they've done it. These particular aliens have never come back. They're unique to this movie.
And one thing I want to mention really quick is there's two kind of elder statesmen of both Toho and the Gojira series. Hiroshi Koizumi, who plays Professor Wagura, he's in Mothra, he's in King Ghidorah, he's in Godzilla Raids Again.
He's on pretty much every poster of every Godzilla poster that there is.
He's in a ton of Gojira films and like Gojira adjacent films for Toho. Professor Miyajima is played by Akihiko Hirata, who of course played Serizawa in the original film.
Yes, and too bad that he still didn't have his eye patch in this film.
And he's also in Sanduro with Toshiro Mifune. He's in Musashi Miyamoto. He's again like just a really well-known face in Japanese film.
Now you'll know this better than me. Were these contract players with Toho?
Yeah, so with Toho, they usually signed a contract like to stay on. It was basically like through the 50s, the 60s, and maybe even into the 70s. Like you signed a contract, and the two big companies were either Toho or Dai, who did Gamera films. So you were basically with one or the other. I think, if I'm correct about it, Akihiko Hirata, he was one of Toho's new faces, which is how Toshiro Mifune got into Toho as well. So they do like this big casting call, and they pick up these new contract players, and then they start like slotting them into films. So they had this thing, it was called the New Faces program. But
I think there's too many professors, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Well, one of them is a specialist in space metal, apparently, because
this is space titanium. He knew exactly what it was.
Well, even if they're like, I'm sure that Mechagodzilla is being controlled by space aliens. It's like, you nailed it, dude.
Right. I know he's just like, he says it so confidently. Like, I'm sure
what other
Mechagodzilla is being remotely controlled by a spaceman.
by one single spaceman, right? With like an Atari joystick.
I mean, it does seem like a pretty big leap of logic for me, but maybe if you're used to Gojira coming out of the water.
You're wearing a silver spacesuit, so you just,
well, just the previous year you had Megalon come from Seatopia, and then Gigan come from Nebula X. So anything's possible, right?
I mean, right. If you just sort of consider the history, and that's always one of the things that's interesting about these films, is that some of them seem to acknowledge, especially the later films, seem to acknowledge that stuff happened before. But then, like, when you get into some of the later area stuff, like the Heisei era and the Millennium era, a lot of those films act like nothing happened in between the original Godzilla and the current.
You just repeat what you've already seen. As a kid, I hated that.
So going along with that theory, or with that train of thought, when Mechagodzilla reveals himself, and there's the first confrontation, and Godzilla does a little as he sees the silver on his arm. One of the professors, I forget which one, who's watching the action with the rest of the cast, says, it's a robot Godzilla. You could call it a Mechagodzilla. And that is exactly his name. So he even has an MG on his arm.
We called it.
So not only does he telegraph that it's made by a spaceman, he picked up his name immediately as well.
Yeah.
And these aliens, when they introduce themselves, not only does the head alien love stogies for some reason, and he's got that dark skin around his eyes, so like his makeup is not that great compared to everybody else's. So you see his monkey origins coming through. He introduces himself from the third planet of the black hole, outer space, like New York, USA.
Let's take a left turn at the Little Dipper, and you'll be there in no time.
So there's a lot to laugh at in here in the plot going on underneath the monster action, and it comes to the point where one of the professors has to work on Mechagodzilla because they're holding his daughter and her friend hostage, and he's very guilty about this. And at the end, after they escape the aliens, he says, "I sold my soul to the devil." And then one of the other characters says, "But you didn't have any choice that time." Like, what else did you do?
How many other times?
How many other times did you sell your soul to the devil?
Meanwhile, those aliens didn't bring a mechanic with them.
Yeah, like an Earthman would know the workings of this creature better than anybody else that actually made him originally. And they were correct.
I did find it really bizarre when they're trying to wake up King Shizar. And the girl singing, I'm like, that's like the worst alarm clock in the world. It's like, you got to be like just standing on the beach waiting. And then Mechagodzilla takes his sweet butt time. He could have just flown over there and taken it before he even woke up. Nah, I'm going to lumber over there. Let him stretch himself out.
She's not going to wake him up. He's going to be asleep by the time I get there. Why waste
a little
fuel?
beachside serenade for Shizar.
And he really does need to be coaxed out of bed. I mean, he takes a long time.
The entire song, like how many verses of this song are we going to
imagine if you just hit the snooze button and squished her?
I mean, the song is catchy, but it's no Mothra song.
It's no Mothra.
She's a little pitchy. She hits a couple of bad notes in there as well.
That's no, that's a no for me, dog.
If you are familiar with any of the marketing materials around this film, I'm thinking of the Famous Monsters spread, and not so much the posters, but in a lot of the photos that you would see from this, King Caesar is not represented whatsoever. He's always cropped out, so it's always Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. So he's kind of an afterthought in this, and he doesn't offer much help.
No, not at all.
He is very bizarre looking, and he is one of the more unique kaiju. I'll give him that.
Right.
But unfortunately, he doesn't bring that much to the table, although his power seems to be mimicking whatever you throw at him back at his adversary. Because right at the beginning of the battle, when he wakes up and Godzilla's not there yet, and it's just him against Mechagodzilla, Mechagodzilla hits him with his laser a few times, and then the jewel in his head reflects it back at Mechagodzilla, and that's pretty cool. But you only see it a couple of times, and then he's on the run pretty much until Godzilla gets there. There's a lot of
pyrotechnics going off in this one. Because when they get into the three-way fight, my inner 10-year-old, like, there's a scene, I mean, Mechagodzilla spinning his head around, and I hate the fact, even as a kid, that he had like endless missiles coming out of his fingers.
Yeah, they just
literally saw them go away, and then all of a sudden he has them back again to fire another round. But there's a scene where he's in the middle, and he just kind of puts his foot up on the rock. Yeah. And he's got Shizar on one side and Godzilla on the other, and he's just they're coming at him, and he's just hitting them with this barrage. And I'm like, this is fun. This is there was a lot of explosions, so it kept my little inner child happy.
The one thing is notable is there's some pretty major blood spurt in this.
I was going to bring that up because is this like that was pretty substantial blood spurt coming out of Godzilla's
that never
neck.
made it onto TV. That blood spurt did not exist in the TV broadcast.
So were you
even in the earlier fight when Mecha G pulls apart Anguirus's jaw and there's blood pouring out of the jaw? Like,
that's funny because I don't really remember that, and maybe because I saw it on TV and it was cut out. But in the '76 Kong, that's exactly how he takes out the snake. And I'm like, I wonder if that was an homage now that I go back and rewatch that, because in the original 33 Kong, didn't he do the same thing?
He did the same thing to the...
Okay, and then he actually slapped the jaw a couple times.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And played with it. But the arterial spray that comes out of the alien's neck at the end when they shoot him in the throat is pretty intense. And then, of course, Godzilla gets blood spurting out of him when he's getting hit by the missiles, and then he's getting when Mechagodzilla is doing the flybys over his head. A tough battle, but a quick battle for Godzilla, because suddenly he reaches down, he pulls that lightning force that he powered up with a little bit earlier, and suddenly he becomes a giant magnet.
Magnetizes himself.
I love like hand wavy science like this, where somebody who's like, so the reason why these professors are in the movie is to give plausibility to the things that are said, right?
He's electrifying
And
himself.
they're like, so I see he's transformed himself into a magnetic pole.
Do you ever wonder if Godzilla was just like a frustrated architect? Like, why is he so mad at all these buildings? Like, he's just constantly taking them out. What did it do to you? Just leave that apartment building
He's trying to walk and there's stuff in his way.
Yeah, it's like
He's lumbering. Walk around it.
Even if you try, you're going to knock some stuff around sometime. And let me just point out that it wasn't Godzilla that knocked down that building in this film. It was his robot double. So,
which always drove me nuts, because there's no way, like, once you do the Mechagodzilla reveal, his snout is way too long to actually fit into the Godzilla head. They don't.
Yes, and he's got that horn on the top of his head.
Even as a kid, I'm like, that doesn't line up. It's not anatomically correct. But
so my son said, as a solution, that Shiza should have just peed on Mecha-G, because he is a dog.
Shorted him out.
Yeah, he's waking up after how many years? He's got to go.
Yep. It's like he could have just peed on him and this would have been over.
That's when he shows up in the Legendary series. He'll be on there for like 2 seconds.
Right. So after Godzilla becomes a giant magnet, and he's willing with his fists Mechagodzilla, because Mechagodzilla is trying to fly away, and he's like, "No, come back!" Like
the Wonder Woman's invisible lasso.
So Mechagodzilla cannot defeat the magnet pull, so he gets stuck to Godzilla. And at that point, King Caesar runs into him and does a shoulder block a couple of times.
Off the top ropes.
Causes an avalanche of sparks to come out of Mechagodzilla's neck and torso. And then Godzilla does the coup de grace. He rips his head off after twisting it around backwards a few times.
Oh, we already saw his head spin like...
Yeah, so we know that it is flexible enough to spin around, but...
apparently,
that's how Godzilla takes him out, rips his head off. The whole thing explodes. The thing is wrapped up in a nice little bow at the end. Aliens dead, arterial spray everywhere.
Deal.
Done.
We all won.
Right, 84 minutes. Like, we're in, we're out. Even like with the sort of preponderance of backstory, side story, whatever you want to call it, there's some fast cuts in this. Like, there's zero connective tissue. Like, it's just like, let's go. Next plot point, next plot point. Like, they just keep moving to the next
Fisticuffs, blood spurt, and explosion.
Nambara, the Interpol agent, who looks like a Yakuza, and he just acts like a Deus Ex Machina, right? He's just magically there whenever they need him, save them from peril.
Yeah, and apparently he was not protecting movie copyrights that week. He was facing aliens.
Oops. I forgot Godzilla or Mechagodzilla had knee cannons too.
Yes, he did. He had cannons coming from everywhere.
Yes, he did. Is that a missile, or he just? Oh, never mind.
So, as Christina was saying, this thing rockets along at 85 minutes, but when it was played on TV, they chopped this to fit into, I think, an hour and 15-minute time slot. And to fit in commercials with that, you're cutting out like 25 minutes, 30 minutes of plot. And even with that cut out, I felt it was too long in between the monster fights. Because as a kid, you don't really care about the human story. You don't really care about the explanation. You just want to see the fights. Correct. I can't imagine sitting and watching this and trying to work out what the plot is from those extremely truncated versions that they showed on TV. But again, this was just to whet the appetite for Megalon and then Smog Monster. So for that, it served its purpose for me as a kid. This is just like the opening act to the other two that were coming. Now, the reason that it's the second from last Godzilla film in the Showa era is because the box office was kind of diminishing as the movies were going along. It was just too much of a good thing. Kids were just kind of going elsewhere because there were so many Ultraman, Ultra Q type shows that were on TV in Japan that was competing. And you don't have to pay to see that in the theater. You can just watch it on TV. So that's a big reason why the Godzilla movies weren't showing the box office return. This did a little better in terms of box office than Megalon did, but still not enough to sustain it. There was only one more movie after this, and then it was done for 10 years. I think it was a hit in America. I couldn't get numbers, but I remember this TV commercial showing when it was playing in theaters in 77. And the one scene I remember was the head spinning around and the force field coming down. So I never saw it in a theater, unfortunately, but I think it was a regional hit anyway. But by that time, it was too late. Toho wasn't making these anymore. I don't know if we're ready for buckets, but any Godzilla movie is going to rate highly for me just because it's Godzilla. So I'm going to say this is a solid 3.
I'll agree with you on that.
Because of the reasons I brought up. It's not a great Godzilla. It's not my first go-to, but it's got King Caesar. It's got the first Mechagodzilla appearance, and the fight is fun at the end.
Yes, agreed.
Yep, same.
There
It's
you
a
go.
3. I mean, it's not like, if you're looking at the collection, it's not the first one that I'm gonna watch.
Well,
but-
I almost watched Terra Mechagodzilla. So.
Well, and my son actually prefers the Millennium Era one, the Godzilla against Mechagodzilla.
Yeah.
So we watched that as well.
I have one little tidbit of fact. I'm sure Jim probably knows this, but I thought this was fun. This is the only Godzilla film that was ever released in Hungary. Do you know this?
Really?
It was the only one. And 2 of the reviews: utterly worthless film and worst science fiction movie in history. And they did not.
Was somebody fact checking the plot?
I don't know. Yeah,
theater?
right. How dare they? But this is going to send you over the edge. They deem Roland Emmerich's version to be the only one and true Godzilla film.
Oh.
So one more reason to not go to Hungary. But apparently if they were so downtrodden on this, they've just never been exposed to any of the other mirrored versions.
Oh, and looking this up really quick, we were talking about the bloodletting. Even before it made it to TV, when it made it to the U.S., 4 minutes of that were cut. So that was never even shown in U.S. theaters.
Oh, wow.
Because they marketed it to matinees for kids when it made it to the U.S.
Yeah, blood. That's like the chomping King Kong chomping on the people being cut.
And speaking of King Kong,
Oh, nice segue.
our next film is a relative of the big guy. But
Is he a cousin? Is he like Scrappy Doo?
he's kind of like a second cousin, I would say.
Yeah.
Mighty Joe Young. But before we make it to Mighty Joe Young, we're going to the concession stand with a bunch of vintage commercials that would have been
Sweet.
showing in the early 80s when we were watching these on TV. So enjoy these, and we'll be right back with Mighty Joe Young.
Tomorrow afternoon, starting at 1, WOR-TV presents a full afternoon of action and adventure. Jack Palance stars in Godzilla vs. the Cosmic Monster, followed by Godzilla vs. Megalon, and then Godzilla takes on the Smog Monster.
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, see the all-new 111th edition of the greatest show on earth. Whether you're 2 or 102, you'll never forget this year's new fashion circus and the old-fashioned tradition with the world's greatest animal trainer, death-defying high-wire artist, and the funniest clowns on the face of this earth. It's the experience of a lifetime. Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circuits.
Now at Meadowlands Arena. Also coming to Nassau Coliseum Thursday, December 3rd. See your newspaper for details.
We will continue with King Kong following these messages.
Chain lightning, chain lightning, chain lightning.
You get a quick setup machine.
You can set up over bridges, curve them all around, but the most goes when you knock them all down. Chain lightning, chain lightning, chain lightning. Knock them all down. Chain lightning, chain lightning, chain lightning.
Chain Lightning comes with what you see here, including 600 Chain Lightning dominoes from Hasbro.
Martin Paint is revving up for our stupendous winter sale with warehouse direct-to-use savings. New in-stock 1982 wall covering, now just 49 cents to $9.99 a single roll. No waiting. Take it home today. Don't be left out in the cold. Shop Martin Paint's winter sale and save.
Martin's Home Decorating Center, it ain't just paint. Fresh and fancy, fresh and fancy. Makeup, you make up yourself. Fresh and fancy, you can make up your nails in fashion colors. Fresh and fancy, you can gloss your lips, mix your colors, make your own eyeshadow. Fresh and fancy. Fresh and fancy from Hasbro at most toy stores.
Oh, when you think you're ready, fall down to Crazy Eddie, the man who's got most everything. Stereo sound, his audio selection, Wally with your perfection. He's the man with all the lowest prices around. So come on down and put him to the test. See whose prices really are the best. Who fix you up with the sound that fits your place and guarantee a smile upon your face. Oh, when you think you're ready, fall down to Crazy Eddie, the man who's got most everything. Stereo sound, and so the story's told across the whole wide world. Crazy Eddie will not ever be undersold. If you want to win the game, you gotta take good aim and get the most marbles with your hippo. Playing Hungry, Hungry Hippos. Hungry, Hungry Hippos.
Hungry, Hungry Hippos is the name of the game, and who's ever hippo gets the most marbles wins.
Playing Hungry, Hungry Hippos. Hungry, Hungry Hippos.
I win!
Hungry, Hungry Hippos from Hasbro.
Okay, we are back. And much like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla or Cosmic or Bionic Monster, whatever you want to call it, Mighty Joe Young was often the first movie that they played on Thanksgiving Day. There was a trio of King Kong movies. This, if you consider Mighty Joe Young a King Kong movie, this was the first. They played the original Kong second, and then the sequel, Son of Kong, to close out the day. So this wasn't really as well-balanced a viewing day as the second, the Godzilla film, because Kong undoubtedly was the hero film of the day by leaps and bounds over these two. Son of Kong, easily the least of the three. So it really was an anticlimax when you got through Son of Kong, like, what did I just watch? I should have ended this at King Kong. But Mighty Joe Young did kind of fill that role that we were just talking about. It whet your appetite for the main event of King Kong because it is a very likable fantasy, a little girl and her gorilla. Now,
A little girl and her gorilla.
Now, her name is Jill Young, and this is why our hero here is named Joe Young, because she adopts him. Now,
Mr. Joseph Young.
Mr. Joseph Young. Now, Jill and her father live in Africa, and this baby gorilla is purchased.
Yeah, it's always good to know where your daddy's fine china and the expensive jewelry are, huh?
And his flashlight.
And his
Apparently.
flashlight.
That was the key part of this
Those two guys
transaction.
made out like bandits.
I don't know. Do you really think so? They just got a flashlight. I think that they
But they were probably like amazed.
This is not the kind of thing that you think of when you watch this as a kid. This is a cringy moment here.
It's super cringy. There's many super cringy moments. It's very, very painful, like especially now, to see African culture exploited for white people's entertainment.
It is
Oh my God,
appropriated
there is
for this.
appropriated multiple times throughout this. But I will point out the fact that it was revealed that even when they were speaking Swahili, no, it was just made up.
It was made up.
gibberish.
It was made up by the
gibberish,
screenwriter.
and it's very obvious that it's made up.
Yeah, I mean, like some of these scenes are so hard to watch and just like, I mean,
because Jill wants to trade beads for this baby gorilla.
Right.
But that's the plot. She trades whatever she can find for this baby gorilla, which she names Joe, and puts it in her. And her father is about to shoot whatever is in the bed until the joke is revealed, and he pulls back the sheets, and there's little Joe. And now this is the carry through. And I'm very sorry that they didn't go back to this more than they did. That the song "Beautiful Dreamer" is what causes Joe to calm down and what puts him to bed as an infant gorilla. And I remembered this song. This is one of the key things that I remembered from watching this as a kid, that song is what calmed him down, but it's only in the movie twice. And then they play it over the credits at the end.
I was gonna say, I think she hummed it at one point.
at one point she whistles.
It whistles.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, agreed. That was this was one of my mom's favorite movies. and she always liked that part where she played Beautiful Dreamer
Soothe the savage beast.
in the film. So it's if you compare this to King Kong, this reminds me a lot of the later Showa era films that we were just talking about, where it's much less serious than the earlier work, and it's clearly meant to appeal like to kids and families. You know, it just doesn't have at all the same tone as like a King Kong.
Yeah, but it follows the same story structure, basically.
Yes, it does. You still have Robert Armstrong as the Marion Cooper stand-in.
Yes. Here we go.
Talking
Carl
about
Denham.
familial ties
It's like,
to King Kong. You've got
this
Denham.
guy just like Carl Denham. I'm like, wait a minute, it is Carl Denham.
This is basically Carl Denham with a different name. He's Max
and he
O'Hara
even uses the "bring him back alive," and I'm like, no, that's
Yeah.
Frank Buck's line. So now you're just reappropriating everything. You're just stealing it all. I did like when we were first introduced to him, and he's a very over the top character. And he was like, "You're gonna love my newest story, How I Escaped Pygmy Cannibals." And I'm like, "Holy, that's the title of my autobiography." So I was very amazed at that.
And you know, Ray Harryhausen actually said that Marion Cooper would come onto set. He was a producer of this. He didn't direct it, and he said he always wanted things to be bigger. And the person who was interviewing Harryhausen said, "Like Max O'Hara," and he said, "Yes, like Max O'Hara." It's like because you know these characters were always just stand-ins for Cooper.
Right.
It's interesting that you say that, because some of the criticism that's levied against Mighty Joe Young is that the ape scale keeps changing throughout.
It does. It is a little all over.
And
the
that's
place.
because Cooper kept saying, "I want him bigger for this scene," and so Harryhausen had to do it.
Yeah. So let's talk about Harryhausen a little bit, because this is really his first. Like, he was tutelage underneath Willis O'Brien, who created the King Kong from '33 and was the master at stop motion.
And he oversaw Harryhausen for
well,
this.
I mean, Harryhausen gets like first technician credit, where Willis O'Brien gets like technical creator credit. But Harryhausen did 85 to 90% of the animation of this character. I mean, his name is attached,
the same,
but
that same stop motion style that was used for King Kong. An armature was done. If you saw the same DVD that I did, there's a bonus feature where Harryhausen talks with the Cheeto brothers from Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And goes over one of the original armatures and all that. This blows my mind that these things could be custom made. Even the fingers with the tiny fingers with tiny joints. The detail.
Harry Cunningham gets credit for the model armature construction.
Although Harryhausen said Delgado in that interview that you're talking about.
Really interesting. Yeah. Well, I know in this movie, so maybe he was going back to the original Kong, not to Mighty Joe Young.
And they said each armature costs like between $1,500 and $2,000 to make, which is a lot of money
back then
in 1949.
Yeah, he said that 4 were made, correct? 4 were
Four
made.
of them were made, but he had one that he preferred, that he called Jennifer.
That's pretty wild. Unfortunately, I had technical issues last night getting onto my PlayStation, and I was forced to watch this on Amazon Prime on my phone.
Oh no.
It was the only way. I couldn't even sling it up onto my TV. It didn't even give me the option. So I had no bonus features, no nothing. I just watched it directly off of my phone. So I didn't get the full.
You didn't get the full effect. That's too bad. No. But as we were saying, this mirrors King Kong. They go to Africa, O'Hara and his band of cowboys, because the idea is that these cowboys will rope all these animals. O'Hara's going to bring it back to his nightclub and have a fabulous opening when they get back to California. They don't know about Joe, of course. They see Joe.
Surprise, right.
Joe has a little bit of a run-in with the cowboys. So there's a fight, and then there's a great scene where I'm going to call him Denham every time I have to refer to his character.
We might as well, yeah.
O'Hara gets picked up by Joe, and he's dangling him, over this, because Joe has climbed a little bit of a rock formation.
Yep, like
and he's dangling Denham, and you see the shot of Robert Armstrong being held by this hand, and it is. A lot of these things are pretty seamless for the time. It's like you see the hand swinging them, and then it goes to the long shot of the actual armature swinging a little claymation figure of O'Hara, and it looks pretty good, I think.
I'm gonna double down on that, because this looks phenomenal for the time. you have to realize that you have optical photographers that are shooting the live action. You've got the animators who are working the armatures, and you have live lions in this scene. This whole scene where Joe is trying to free the lions from the cages. Every time he grabs the cage, the lion is reacting to where his paw is. I mean, so, you know, you have to, it really blew my mind. As a 10-year-old kid, I probably would have absolutely been enamored with this. I can't remember the last time I saw this. And all I do remember is the end sequence with the fire. I don't remember any of this. It's been so long, but that whole sequence where you know, the cowboys are chasing him and they're lassoing him and he's pulling them, it really is seamless when you realize that they're fighting a 12-inch armature little puppet. And it really is amazing. And sometimes the horses in the foreground are they're animated, you know, stop motion, you know, then you got the live action stuff going on around them. It really, I mean, and the music during the scene completely sells this. It is a very well put together sequence.
Whenever this movie came on when I was a kid, we had to watch it because my mother,
You said your mom was
loved this movie. Loved it way more than she ever loved anything like King Kong.
Yeah,
and
but what little girl didn't want to have a pet gorilla?
And also, I think because Ben Johnson's in it. If you did not have parents who loved John Wayne movies, as I did, then Ben Johnson was probably not a part of your childhood. But Ben Johnson was an integral part of my childhood because my parents loved John Wayne movies. And in fact, interestingly, the reason why Ben Johnson is in this movie is because of John Ford. Because John Ford is the producers.
I was thinking that there was a connection there. Yeah.
And there's some misinformation out there. This says, the Wikipedia page for this says this is Johnson's first credited role, but his first credited role is actually on Three Godfathers, which is a John Ford movie. And he was obviously in a ton of Ford movies. He was Henry Fonda's stunt double on Fort Apache, because he was a real cowboy. He was, in fact, from Oklahoma, as he says in the movie. He was a rodeo champion, and later in his life won the Academy Award for Last Picture Show. But whenever I think of him standing next to John Wayne. You know, so after I watched this movie, I wanted to go and like watch Chisholm or something because I was like,
you used to watch a lot of John Wayne with
you know what's funny is that just there's so much around this podcast. This is like kismet because the day before I watched Mighty Joe Young, I had the day off from work. So what I did was I got a bunch of new Blu-rays, newly remastered films I only had on DVD or not at all beforehand. One of them is Big Lebowski. So I watched it the day before. I was watching some special features, and the Coen brothers and Jeff Bridges was saying how when Sam Elliott comes in to film his scenes as the narrator, they were looking for a Ben Johnson type of cowboy. You know, I think it's unintentional, but his character is so aw shucks in this and funny.
Well, I mean, he hadn't performed a lot at this point. He had been a stunt double. Obviously, like I said, he had been in rodeos, but he hadn't had a lot of like big speaking parts. This was like a big starring role for him. But, you know, Eileen Brennan, who worked with him on Last Picture Show, which, by the way, he didn't want to do because it was too talky, said that he would rather ride 1,000 miles away than speak any of those words. Like he just was not the kind of dude.
We're all there with you.
He was just not the kind of person who wanted to do a lot of talking. So he always played these kind of laconic side parts. And even in this main role, he doesn't really do a lot of talking. And they certainly take every opportunity to show you that he can rope something.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. You don't really know how old she is when she is.
This is kind of weird.
She's like about 20.
Because we do cut 12 years later.
They say that she's 8 at one point. They say she's 8 years old when she adopts Joe.
But they say she's underage.
She's underage. Yeah. That contract's no good. She's underage. You're like, wait. Was she like 4 when we saw her last?
I don't know. Did you have to be 21 to sign a contract?
Maybe you
I
did.
don't
Maybe
know.
it was the
But
same with
underage
Ken.
just means it just sounds a little too.
What I'm getting at is that one of the funniest things that he says. She wants to go back home before Joe goes crazy, and they start to talk with O'Hara about her going back home. She says to him, to Greg, "Well, aren't you coming too?" And he goes, "Huh? Great day in the morning. Yes, I'm coming too."
Slap his knee with his hat.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's before, of course, we haven't gotten to this yet, where Joe goes crazy in the nightclub. Because you do get, and this is another memorable scene, when he first starts to perform early on, you get that beautiful dreamer sequence where he's first revealed and he comes up.
She's playing the piano.
She's playing the grand piano. She's in a beautiful dress. And suddenly he's underneath her and the platform raises and he's holding her and the piano. Right. And then the thing starts to rotate. And again, that was one of the more memorable scenes for me.
So could you say he could really carry a tune?
Ba-dum-bum.
Do you guys plan these out? Like, do you just wait all week for that one?
Sometimes. This is what I do. I don't know what to tell you. You come with all the information. You got backgrounds. Jim's got all this emotional baggage attached to these things. I'm just every once in a while. And most of them end up on the cutting room floor.
We'll keep that one. We'll keep that one.
You'll keep that one? Thank you very much.
I will. And you know what I noticed is that I don't know if people spoke like this back in those days, if it was just relegated to the movies, but O'Hara's and his cronies. O'Hara wants an animal act. Yeah, sure. New angle. That's what we need. Yeah. An animal act. You know, did people actually speak like this back then? Yeah.
Apparently. Although I did turn it into a drinking game every time he called Jill honey. And I blacked out around 12.
Did he ever tell her to smile when he called her in? Why don't you smile some more, honey?
And how about the time, so she did one out of the contract, and he's like, how about I take you to a swell lunch? And all of a sudden it cuts to like, 7 weeks later. I'm like, that must have been one hell of a lunch. And she's like, fine, I'll stay.
But the reason that Joe goes nuts is because of these 3 drunk guys.
Well, let's get so after the whole, because it's this big, huge, blown out gala event. Black tie, people are all in the, I think it was the Coconut Grove Club or something. And they got lions like behind glass, like they're strippers behind the bar. And then he does the big reveal of Joe. But then he brings out like all these muscle men to like do a tug of war with Joe, which was pretty funny.
Yes,
I said I would pay money to see this. Yep. But then it just devolves into, they're throwing coins at him. If he catches your coin, you get a free champagne. And then this is where the 3 drunken patrons just decide that they're gonna sneak backstage and get Joe drunk.
And if you ever want Joe to rip somebody's arm off and beat them over the head, it's these guys. These are
you don't blame him. And then they get mad. They get mad. They give him all the wine bottles, and then they're mad because he drinks them. No, he drank it all.
And then one of them burns Joe. He's had enough, and so have we at this point.
Yeah, no, this is, Imagine animating the drunken ape, though. That must have been fun.
And he was. They were making him stumble. There's that one part where he gets up on top of the fake tree and he almost falls and he grabs on.
Yeah.
But this is where my wife was getting upset because the animated lions were getting beaten and killed by Joe.
I think they were real lions.
I'm like, there was a mixture. There was a real lion, but then there were scenes where like the lions would slip across the floor after the real lion would like land on a table. I'm like, how are they doing that?
Yeah, they're like throwing the lion. They have like a special lion thrower. We're just gonna shuffle him.
Yeah, you didn't get the PETA message at the end of this movie that no animals were harmed.
No lions were harmed.
Yeah.
Sorry, can't say that.
So then a little bit of order is brought back after he rampages through the nightclub. The police come and they say that they have to put him down. They already say that they've shot the lions, which again upset my wife.
That
they shot the lions.
Yeah.
And now they've got to do the same with Joe. So now it's too late for him to go back. O'Hara feels terrible. As he should.
Suddenly he's got a conscience. Yeah. But this is weird because it goes through like this melee in the club, and then it just cuts to like a court procedural.
But then O'Hara, to redeem himself, he comes up with a plan that they've got to sneak Joe out, and he's going to feign a heart attack to do it, and get Joe in a van and get him to a ship and get him back to Africa.
And that was a good APB.
We got an escaped gorilla in a white van. Escaped gorilla in a white van.
I just saw one in a brown van. Couldn't be the same one.
But this comes to the sequence that Jeff, you're talking about. This is the only thing that you remember is after a very long chase.
It's very long. The chase scene is
now. I'm convinced that this, just like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, was cut severely for TV, not for content, but just for time. And I don't remember this scene being that long. I think they cut the heart out of this, which probably they should have to begin with.
See,
it does seem like it was added on.
The movie's 90 minutes long, and I think if they cut like a minute here, a minute there, more than a few sequences seem like they're going on like just a little bit too long. If they had cut some of those sequences down, they could have gotten this down to like 85 minutes, which I think would have been more appropriately paced, because I think it sags sometimes. Like it's just like every scene is going on just a little bit longer than it should.
And at one point, Joe was sitting on the back of the truck and spits at the cars chasing them. They just happen to come across a burning orphanage.
A burning orphanage. It's like how they've escaped. Now how are we going to end this movie? I know. Let's have him save some
because Joe has to clear his name. So they stop. Jill tells Greg to stop the burning orphanage. They all go in. They start rescuing the kids. And now this is very interesting because on the version that I saw, as soon as they get to the fire, it tints red. The black and white is suddenly tinted red.
Yes. Yep.
For TV copies, which we were familiar with from back in the day, they didn't do this on the TV. It was straight black and white all the way through. Yeah. In the original theatrical release, it wasn't quite red. It was, according to Harryhausen, it was a mixture of yellow, orange, and red that they did special for the theatrical release. That some copies didn't have that, and that's what ended up on TV. And they tried to correct that with these DVD copies and these newer versions of the film that we've seen. So everything is tinted red during the whole sequence of the orphanage.
I thought it was a pretty cool move.
Now, some people think that it's too distracting. I've read some things online where they're up in arms that this takes them right out of the movie, and I didn't.
Well, listen, there's a hand colorized version, isn't there? Isn't that one at one point?
I think there is.
They got into going and hand coloring this stuff, and I'm just like, if this is the one thing that they wanted to do artistically, I give them a pass. I thought it was cool.
So Greg, Jill, they go into the building. They're pulling kids out, and at one point, the fire is raging so much they have to continue to go up to the roof because they can't get down.
Get to the roof.
Yeah,
that's the worst possible thing.
But they have to. The stairs are collapsing behind them, so they've got two kids and Joe, who's just hanging out up until this point. He's still in the back of the truck. Jill calls Joe. And Greg makes a little makeshift bag, like a hobo bag that carries these two kids, and he lassos them down. Joe comes up. He makes sure that Jill is out of danger, first and foremost. And then there's still a small little girl that's left up there. Joe has to go save her. So that's the kind of the end game of this, is Joe going up the tree and risking life and limb to save this little girl, which he does. Happy ending. Joe ends up back in Africa with Jill and Greg, and they send a little hello film to send back to Max O'Hara.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah. And then cue the beautiful Dreamer with the orchestra, and then credits. The ending is very nice, and it is emotional.
Right. And they didn't shoot him off a building. So.
And you have that whole child in peril angle of it as well. Yeah, and I welled up a couple of times in between cringing. There was a
you crying,
a plethora of emotions going on. I enjoyed it. This viewing, I really liked it.
Like I said, outside of that fire sequence at the end, I really have no memory.
Imagine how you would have liked it if you didn't have to watch it on your phone. If you saw it in its full splendor on your TV.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well.
But yeah, as we had alluded to before, this was not a hit in the summer of 1949. It was given one of the first Oscars, if not the first, for special effects upon release. I think I don't think it was out too long before it got an Oscar for that. But the budget was $1.8 million. It made $1.95 million, so barely made over budget.
Made its money back. Yeah.
And I think they still were in the hole for marketing costs and everything else. So it wasn't a hit at the time. So I think it's grown in stature over the years. But it wasn't a big deal when it was released, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's taken on cult status at
Yeah.
this point.
I think it was a huge disappointment to the studio because RKO, who released King Kong, they thought this was a sure thing.
Yeah.
Because they'd re-released Kong in 38, 42, 46, and it was a hit every single time. So
They should have listened to Cooper, made him bigger.
Made him bigger, yeah.
Made him bigger. I did notice they never once referred to him as Mighty, just Mr. Joseph.
Just Mr. Joe.
Yeah, 14 months alone just to complete the special effects sequences.
Well, and I think that's really what this film is known for now, because it's
Yeah.
like a big leap forward in
Like I
terms
said,
of...
that it really is impressive. You know, I know what we can do now with CG and whatnot, but
Well, you can see, like, you know, how the process of working on this works up to something like Harryhausen's work on Jason and the Argonauts, you
Mhm.
know, we're just doing these increasingly more complex sequences. And I think that's one of the reasons why this film has remained popular, because people who are interested in stop motion and the history of stop motion, like, really revere this film.
Yeah.
For the complexity of those stop motion.
I definitely have newfound respect for it.
They were actually planning, even before it was out, they were planning on a sequel called Joe Meets Tarzan.
Right, I saw this.
Which never happened because of the box office failure. I think that's kind of a good thing. I don't imagine how a movie called Joe Meets Tarzan would be.
Imagine
any
if he
good
tried to pull a
whatsoever.
cheetah and just like sit on Tarzan's shoulder and just crush him. Movie
And fun
over.
fact, when Joe first goes nuts in the nightclub, on the soundtrack, the first scream you hear is Fay Wray's from King Kong.
I did read that.
Yeah.
Also in that club scene, Granny from Beverly Hillbillies, Irene Ryan, she's in there.
Really?
She was an extra. She was an extra. Yeah. I'd be hard pressed to point her out, but listen, I could barely see it on my phone. If it was on the TV, maybe. That's right.
To illustrate just how little the public knew about these special effects back then, the review in Variety, the reviewer kept referring to Joe as a robot throughout the review. If you read the thing,
the robot,
the Joe robot, you know, because he's not referring to he's not saying that Joe himself is a robot, but the special effect.
They knew for a fact that, well, I mean, they probably wanted to keep that stuff kind of, you know, like the mystery or the mystique of it all. You know, how did they pull it off? How did they make it? You know, you find out that this thing is, you know, 8 inches tall and it kind of loses some of its luster. I mean, we now can look at it and be like, that's amazing. But maybe back then they were like, really? That's kind of silly.
I liked this better than Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I would go 3.5.
I went 3 1/4.
This is still a 3 for me, even though, like, it was...
Even with a personal connection.
Your mother is shaking her head. Right
My
now.
mother loves this movie. I didn't say I love it.
I understand. Oh, wow.
Let me clarify.
Yes.
But it was, like, just an indelible part of my childhood. And like I said, just whenever I see Ben Johnson, I just sort of feel nostalgic because of I know I've seen more Ben Johnson movies than the average person my age. So
that's pretty funny.
So for the love of Mike, let us now go to the confessional.
Confessionals.
It's a Thanksgiving themed confessional this week, and this is
Mike?
Jeff's. So Jeff, take it away.
Basically, I was just lamenting any kind of specific memories or feelings attached to Thanksgiving. By and large, I don't remember Thanksgiving being all that big in my family. And yet, just the other day, I came home from work and my wife had made me a ham because we are hosting Thanksgiving this year and we are not making a ham. And the smell immediately of baked ham with cloves transported me back to Thanksgiving with my grandma and grandpa Chandler. My grandmother, who passed away in 78, 79, maybe at the latest. So I was pretty young, and it's amazing how, you know, your olfactories are like little time machines, or like little time travel machines. There are times I can smell the inside of my Star Wars lunchbox, you know, and I can smell the bologna sandwich, you know, as I'm eating it in 6th grade in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
But 26 plus years ago, I was invited to my in-laws for the very first time. I was dating my wife, and I don't think I realized how big Thanksgiving was to me. Being able to hang out, you know, the full family, playing football with the cousins in the backyard. And unfortunately, that is now gone. You know, they're in the process of selling the house. I lost my father-in-law. Macy's Day Parade is big. It'll be on my TV or whatever. But I think Thanksgiving at the end of the day is probably bigger for me than Christmas. Moby Dick for whatever reason too, and I think as a little kid, I remember being at my grandparents and Moby Dick was on TV, and I was absolutely enamored with it. And again, that's you want to talk about Godzilla and waiting for the monster sequences. There's a hell of a lot of talking that goes on in between the whale attacks, but still, it kept me glued. I couldn't wait to see that damn thing. Yeah,
Jeez, Jeff, I'm dabbing my eyes after that confessional.
Like I said, I came up with this a couple weeks ago, but the ham threw me over. Like I was ill prepared for the effect it had on me. Because, like I said, my grandmother passed away quite a few years ago. My grandfather I lost in '96, the year I got married, and yeah, it's crazy. But there you go. Sorry, that's some TMI right there.
I think you could go, Jim, because I.
Mine is quick. Mine is these
so is
movies. Mine
Yeah.
is these movies. Yeah. That is the most indelible memory of Thanksgiving, is sitting and enduring the Thanksgiving Day Parade just to wait for Mighty Joe Young to come on afterwards, and then King Kong.
Very
And
fun.
again, the meal was an interruption to my
Come eat.
viewing.
No, I don't. Were you allowed to eat in front of the TV? No.
No, I was not. So I was always picked a seat where I could see the TV.
So the TV was left on. You just weren't
TV was
allowed
left
to eat.
on, yes. And
Okay.
usually my uncle that was already drunk was usually asleep on so the TV was left on for him, but he was not watching it. He was asleep.
No.
So I was just like kind of not listening to anybody and watching what was going on with Son of Kong usually at that time.
There you go.
But yeah, that's my big memory, is watching these movies and then waiting for the next day with unbelievable anticipation, because as much as I enjoyed King Kong, it was nothing compared to watching a Godzilla movie.
Nope. I agree with you there.
Yeah, so I feel really terrible because Jeff has such a strong emotional attachment to Thanksgiving, but like Thanksgiving really means nothing to me.
Fair.
In our family, like it seemed like the bigger celebrations were always around Christmas, like where everybody got together. So it was always like Thanksgiving was somehow more truncated for whatever reason. Like maybe just my grandparents would come over, or maybe an aunt or whatever. But it was never like a huge thing when I was growing up. I don't even remember watching the parade every year. I mean, I think my parents turned it on, but I don't remember being riveted by it.
Yeah, it was just on. It always had to be on.
It always has to be on, even to this day.
And as an adult, because I've lived now for 20 years in Chicago, we've usually planned, if we see our family, we go back home at Christmas time. So Thanksgiving's just been the three of us. Well, first just me and my husband, then our son. And it's just a day off. I make a Thanksgiving dinner, but we actually have it at dinner time, and I make like what would normally be like your appetizer spread if you had a lot of people. We do that at lunch. So
Nice.
like at lunchtime we have like appetizers, and then we just play board games all day.
But do you do the turkey? Do you do
Yeah, I do turkey.
stuffing? Rice?
Stuffing. So I do like four things. So I'll do like sweet potatoes, stuffing, a turkey, and then like maybe a salad.
More importantly, do you do
Biscuits.
the cranberry sauce that's shaped like a can?
No, I make cranberry sauce.
No.
With berries.
It's
whole
always gotta be.
berries.
I've always got to do the can one. My
See,
grandma
my-
used to
There
make
always has been that
cranberry.
alternative. There's always the real cranberry, and somebody prefers the can.
I do.
My mother prefers the can. So, but ever since I've started doing Thanksgiving on my own, I've done the whole berries because I
Wow.
actually.
So you throw your mom under the bus with Mighty Joe Young, and now the cranberry sauce.
It's true.
This is hard. This is-
Poor mom. Sorry, mom.
I'm pretty sure she'll.
Donna, I love the cranberry sauce in the can too.
We love Mighty Joe Young.
But yeah, I always do the whole berry sauce. It only takes like 5 minutes to make it. So like to me, there's just no reason not to. But one of the reasons actually why I don't do a ton of stuff for Thanksgiving, not just because it's only a few of us, is because I live in an apartment and I have one oven.
Yeah, that's the issue I'm running into right now, which is
I put the turkey on the bottom, and then I put the sweet potatoes and the stuffing on the top rack, and that's it. Like I cannot put anything else.
You can't make anymore. Yeah.
In the oven. That's all I've got. And then I usually have to put in, like I'll make biscuits or scones or something, and I'll put them in after, like while the turkey's resting, because I don't have enough space to do everything. But I mean, the one kind of tradition we've had is, obviously since I've lived here, I've done like a turkey trot every year. Not this year. We did one when Henry was really young, pushing him in the stroller. I remember it was such a cold day, and he was
miserable,
like just tiny guy, like frozen in the jogging stroller. But yeah, for us, like Thanksgiving just isn't a huge thing. It's just sort of a mellow day, and you eat some food, and
there's nothing wrong with that, man.
You get some leftovers, and that's it.
And this year, I'm going to be watching next week's movie on Thanksgiving Day, hopefully.
Look at you.
So maybe we should talk about that now. Next week, we are taking a week off of our holiday-themed episodes. We are going to be coming back the week after with Christmas, but next week, it's all going to be about David Bowie. Now, those longtime listeners will know that I am obsessed with David Bowie. I thought this opportunity was too great to resist. There's a new movie out. It's already controversial, called Stardust. It is not approved in any way by the Bowie family. So it is a biopic of a certain period of his life, which has none of his music. So if you're expecting a Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocket Man type of review, it's not going to happen with Stardust. So even now, going into this, I am apprehensive about whether I'm going to like this or not, but it's too good of an opportunity to let pass that we are also going to cover Velvet Goldmine, which is one of my favorite Bowie movies. Also, interestingly, not approved by the Bowie family or Bowie himself, because this came out well before he passed. So his music is not in this, but there's a lot of great music that is. So I think, and I may be talking too early, I don't know if I'm going to like or dislike Stardust, but I have a feeling that maybe we can compare the two as this is the way you do it without his music, and this is the way you don't do it without his music.
It sounds like you're prejudging, Jim.
I am, and I got to slap myself for that.
Well, you got to lower your expectations.
Open mind.
I am going to be honest right here. I have never seen Velvet Goldmine.
Velvet Goldmine is really
pretty
good.
High on you.
Yeah. It's a really well performed, well directed movie.
I hope I get a chance to see it this week.
Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes is the director who has gone on
Ewan McGregor's in it, correct?
Much Oscar success. Ewan McGregor, Christian Bale.
Obi-Wan and Batman.
Toni Collette is in it as well.
Yeah, it's got a great cast, and I mean, I think Ewan McGregor is outstanding in this movie.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. No, expectations are high now.
Yeah. So next week, Stardust and Velvet Goldmine.
Nice.
So come back and join us, please.
Thanks for listening. Third annual Monster.
My first.
That is true.
Yes.
That is true. You were not a pro. Aboard the Monster train. All right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
No, I will not cut that check.